Hey guys, today I've got a guest who actually has a blog that he runs called Leaving Work Behind. His name's Tom. I actually don't know how to pronounce your last name. I don't want to mess it up. How do I pronounce it?
It's Ewer.
Ewer. Okay. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got
you got
Tom
it.
Ewer today on the show. I'm up bright and early to do this interview because he's in the UK and I'm here in the States. I'm pretty excited because he actually, his blog title says it all. What most people would love to do. They want to, leave work behind and have the freedom to do what they like. And Tom's here today to talk a lot about, freelance writing and kind of that's how he's been able to leave his day job and be able to work from home. I guess Tom, if you kind of want to share your story and talk a little bit about how you got started online.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess it all started back in May 2011. Uh, really out of nowhere, I decided that I wanted to quit my job. I'd been happy in my job for a long time. It was a good job. I enjoyed it. There was none of that kind of story of people who hate their jobs and they're desperate to get out. But I've been in full-time employment for about 5 years, and although I'd always kind of told myself I'd be an entrepreneur, I realized that after half a decade of employment, I wasn't, and I wasn't taking any steps close to being an entrepreneur. And I realized that I needed to make a change, and that being employed simply wasn't something that I wanted to do long term. It was never what I had in mind for myself. And for some reason, back in May 2011, I had that kind of sudden realization, and I started from there. So for the next 5 months or so, I tried a number of things. I tried niche sites, and I launched my blog, Leaving Work Behind. I built an authority site, and none of these things worked. For instance, a niche site I built over a period of months. I poured a lot of time into it, and finally, it started ranking in Google, and I was making like $3 a day, and I was really excited about that. And
Right.
but then it got slapped by Google, and that was it. It was gone. It was dead. Um, Really kind of demoralizing failures over that kind of 5 or 6 month period. And really, out of sheer frustration, I submitted a bunch of pitches via the Pro Blogger job board, and I didn't really think much of it. It was really an act of desperation more than anything else.
Right.
I had no writing experience. I had no writing qualifications. I nearly failed English at school. It was, I consider myself a decent writer, but I didn't think, never in a million years is someone going to pay me to write for them.
Mm.
But it turns out I was wrong, fortunately. And out of those initial pitches I submitted, I got a job, which was for WPMU.org, which is a blog about WordPress. And from there, I got another job for Manage WP, who I still work for as an editor. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, I quit my job in December. I got a few more clients. I built up the blog. I monetized the blog. Last November, I launched an information product. I make some money through affiliate marketing as well. So kind of fast forward to present day, and I've been gradually building that up. And I've got a nice diversified income stream, and I'm really excited about what's to happen in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, so initially, just reading your content, I would have thought, the way that you write your posts and your articles on your blog, that you've obviously been doing this a while. But I think that's funny that you really, you kind of admit that you didn't really do all that well in school. I've kind of felt the same way about myself. Like I can crank out some pretty decent blog posts compared to some things I've seen, but I really was never, I would never consider myself a writer either. So
Mm.
it's, interesting to see. I mean, do you want to dig into, talk a little bit about some of the places you've found work? I know you mentioned the pro blogger job boards. Let's say someone listening, they're interested in, maybe getting into freelance writing. What are some places or websites that they might want to visit or, start with if they're looking to get into that?
Well, there are a lot of places, but I'll tell you what I did. My first job was through the Pro Blogger job board, as was my second job. From then on in, I didn't go in search of a single client myself. They all came to me,
Yeah.
either through my blog or through client referrals. And I don't literally mean clients referring me. I mean through the bylines that they have on their blog. So since then, I haven't gone in search of a single client. They've all come to me, which is really what you want to do, because you're in so much more of a position of strength when a client's coming to you because they're interested in you and they want you specifically. Whereas when you're going out to someone, they don't know you from Adam. You know, you could be anyone, and they're not necessarily that interested.
Yeah.
So my main advice would be to create a blog and use that blog to kind of advertise your wares as a freelance writer. But if you want to kind of go the external route and go out looking for work, which is something that I would recommend if you're not getting loads of client referrals through, is the main one for me is the ProBlogger job board. There are a lot of kind of listings on there that aren't that great, but there are certainly a proportion of them, maybe 10 or 20%, that definitely are worth your time. There's a freelance switch jobs board. That's something you can easily Google. Then there's all the kind of sites like Elance and Odesk. You can occasionally find good work on there, but occasionally is the key word, and you've got to spend a lot of time building up your profile and getting feedback, and to be quite honest, I don't think it's worth it. So I personally would stick to the job boards. I would build up your blog, and I would shoot for getting client referrals through bylines and through your blog as quickly as possible, like I did.
Now, had you ever dived into? I know a lot of these websites out there will, I think there's like Textbroker and iWriter, and there's other sites that are similar where you could, go on there, you sign up, and as you do better, you move up through the ranks in their systems, and you might be able to write, and you'll get paid for X amount of dollars. Was that ever something that you got into at all, or what are kind of your thoughts on those types of sites?
I hate them for writers. They're great for people who want content of an okay quality for very cheap prices, but they're terrible for writers. I mean, you're literally talking about pennies for your time, and I would recommend that people go nowhere near them. The only exception to that, perhaps, is if people want to just gain a bit of confidence in terms of writing for someone, because it's very easy to write for Textbroker because they're not after top quality writers. But that's the only reason I could ever really find for people using them. Instead, I mean, when I talk about freelance writing, I'm talking about, well, for instance, when I started, my first job paid me $15 an hour. And that doesn't seem like a lot now, but at the time, it was roughly about the same as I was getting paid in my job. So it wasn't actually that bad. And actually, when I quit my job, I figured, well, if I can get paid $15-20 an hour and work 8 hours a day, then I'll be okay. But in the end, I mean, my rate, before I kind of stopped freelance writing and moved into a different business model a month or so ago, I was earning upwards of $150 an hour. And that's the potential with freelance writing. So when someone's, putting out a 500-word article for a couple of bucks, that's not what I'm talking about when I say freelance writing. I'm talking about you making $20 an hour to start, working up to 50, and just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it sounds like there's a lot more money in it, and then you just have the potential to grow as the more people see what you're doing. People take notice.
Yeah, that's right.
So really, I guess for anyone that's interested in getting started with article writing, they should probably look at some of these, shoot for the higher end stuff if they really want to get serious about it.
Yeah, I mean, don't underestimate yourself. You're only going to land those bigger jobs if you go for them. If you just tell yourself you can't and you don't, then you definitely won't. Right. If you give it a go, at least you give yourself a chance. I will say that you're not going to land a really high-paying job when you've got no samples, no experience, and no examples of what you're capable of doing. But that's not to say that you should start, in the bargain basement with Textbroker, because you don't need to. The first job I got was for a big blog that gets about 300,000 visits a month. And they were happy to take me on, even though I'd barely written about WordPress. They could just see that I was a good writer and that I was keen and that I had the potential. Yep. And we took it from there. And I ended up writing for them for about 14 months.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously a lot of this is still pretty new to me and potentially to a lot of people listening, but, when so these companies say, you got signed on with this WordPress blog that, I think the one that you mentioned, the WP, MU, yeah, I think that's like a development blog if I'm correct, right?
Not really, no. It's there's a service called WPMU Dev, which is basically a monthly subscription for people who want premium plugins, premium themes,
okay. Yeah.
and full-on support. And the WPMU blog is basically the thing alongside that that obviously tries to drive traffic and make money from. It's generally, it kind of varies from general WordPress tips to blogging tips, but it's generally WordPress centric, but it doesn't tend to be that advanced.
Okay, okay. I guess what I was going to ask was, you worked for the company for some time. Did they kind of give you an idea of the topics and things that you would write about, or is that a lot of stuff that you'd have to come up with on your own?
Generally, they would ask me to propose topics, and that is, unless you're working for, say, a business that has a very specific niche.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, you'll find that people want you to suggest topics, because for a writer, a mistake a lot of wannabe freelance writers make is that they think that good freelance writing is solely about how good a writer you are, and that is, in my experience of hiring plenty of writers as well as being a writer, that's just one small piece of the puzzle. I'm looking for someone to be a good writer, and I'm looking for them to have good ideas, so topic ideas. They've got to be able to think imaginatively and come up with good ideas. And then there's other things such as being organized and being reliable. But to answer your question, generally speaking, they'll require you to come up with your own topic ideas, and that's a big piece of the puzzle for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything like any resources you might particularly use to kind of help you generate ideas for your writing, even for your normal blog or just in general?
Well, to be honest, the short answer is no, but the long answer is that I generally only write about things that are something I have an interest in. So I write about WordPress, I write about freelancing, I write about entrepreneurship, online business. All of these things I have a personal interest in. So that makes the task of coming up with topic ideas much easier because, for instance, with WordPress, a lot of the time, the stuff I write about, I'm educating myself. So I'm planning on writing a post soon about WordPress search because WordPress search is so crap and I want to find a better substitute. And that'll educate me on WordPress search. So that it's based upon a need I have. Freelancing, I can talk about how to deal with clients, which is based upon my own personal experience. And that's been one of the keys to how I've become so successful as a freelance writer is I stick only to those topics generally that I know about, which means I'm able to A, come up with ideas quite easily, and B, write the articles relatively quickly as well.
Right, so a lot of the stuff you're writing as well is kind of on a need basis, something that you may be looking for that you know other people could be looking for. It's going to serve a need.
It's generally based on need, either something I need, which I think other people will need, or something I've discovered that other people might already be in search for that I've found the answer to.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty awesome. I like that you've been able to kind of come up with things based on what people are looking for. I know that I spoke with someone who is a product creator, and that's sort of the same way they pursue creating products because they're looking for something like a product that might do something for them, and if they can't find it, then that's how they sort of proceed with the product creation.
Yeah, I mean that's how I work with WordPress plugins. I'm not a developer by any means, but I have a developer who I work with, and I've created 3 or 4 WordPress plugins, which I've released free of charge on WordPress.org, and every single one I've created is simply a result of me wanting functionality that doesn't yet exist in another plugin.
Right.
It's the best way to come up with. It's really the best way to do anything. It's the best way to write articles. It's the best way to come up with products and services. Is to find something that isn't there and create a solution.
Right. Makes sense. Now, I guess in regards to the article writing in general, I know one of the big things, and I guess the key term people like to use is guest blogging in general. Is that something that that you've done a little bit of, or kind of what are your thoughts on that in general?
Is this pertaining to kind of trying to market a blog?
Yeah, let's say I think in most cases people are guest blogging because I guess it's a combination of they probably want to build a relationship with the owner of the blog as well as potentially drive traffic and maybe potentially get that post to rank on Google depending on how they write it.
Yeah, I've done a lot of guest posting. I wrote a guide on guest posting a while back. So yeah, I've done a lot of it. It's a strategy that can be very successful or very unsuccessful depending on how you approach it. And there's two kind of schools of thought when it comes to guest posting. It's either the quality or the quantity approach, and either or can work. So, for instance, the quantity approach is don't necessarily write the best articles in the world, but just get them published over so many posts that in aggregate, so many blogs that in aggregate you get a good result. I'm not a fan of that. I prefer the quality approach, which is where you literally write the best possible content you possibly can for a blog and release it in the hope that you'll be able to utilize the platform that blog already has to make that post very, very successful in the long term. That's the strategy I advocate. It's not one that I personally followed that closely. I did it with a few posts and they're very successful, but I don't guest post anymore because I think there's a point at which your blog gets big enough where guest posting just isn't really that useful anymore. Most guest posts might send you a couple of hundred people referrals. Some will send you more if they're wildly successful, or if they're on really big blogs and well promoted. But there comes a point at which when you've got, say 30,000 visitors a month, that a guest post that sends you a couple of hundred visitors isn't really going to benefit you that much. But it's definitely something I'd recommend for startup and intermediate bloggers.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. I know I've done about 3, and each of them sent some traffic, but it sort of dropped off, after like a week or so. Once it sort of falls behind. But I know one of them, the guy was able to get it to rank for, I think I did like a product review. So product review, whatever the product name was, review actually ranks on Google.
So, yeah, I mean that's good, but to be honest, we shouldn't necessarily talk about SEO because I have no interest in SEO anymore. I used to obsess over it. I used to kind of try and work with Google until I realized that Google is just so unpredictable, and in some ways it's still so basic. I mean, if you go to viperchill.com, which is a great blog, Glenn Allsop there has been doing some really good articles recently on basically how Google still allows utter rubbish to rank on the first page, no problem at all, and has this massive preference for fresh content. And I did an article recently on my blog where I talked about how I'd created this site which I felt was a really good resource, and it was being ranked below sites that were quite plainly, objectively speaking, complete trash. So Google is a real, I mean, if you can get it right, that's great, but the problem is you get it right and then the algorithm changes and you've got to relearn it all. So I go from the kind of basis of create great content, network with your fellow bloggers, and kind of get out there in the blogosphere. You'll get links naturally, and in time you'll get the rankings as well. I'm not saying I don't want to get traffic off Google because it's a huge traffic source, but I'm just saying that it's not really a concern of mine. I know that if I do all the right stuff around it, the traffic from Google will come in good time.
Now, do you find? I guess this could kind of go hand in hand, but what I've seemed to notice, just sort of following and learning from a lot of these bigger bloggers, is that, I've heard some people, like when I originally really kind of got into this stuff about a year ago myself, that I was actually told that I should blog every single day. Now, I've seen some people actually have results with that, surprisingly, but I mean, what kind of quality content are you going to get out if you post a blog every day? I mean, I actually tried for 60 days, and just to get a blog post out there, I would embed like a video off YouTube and then talk about it in 2 sentences just because I could say I blogged for that day. But I do have some of the articles I wrote that were in length, and they actually rank on Google, and it was because I was passionate about something. Like, I talked about painting my car, for example, and I did a review on the product I used to do it, and it's ranking. But it's a very lengthy article. Now, what I've kind of noticed is over time, just following some of these big bloggers, I know Neil Patel of like Quicksprout.com just posted a 40,000 word article. I mean, not really the normal if you kind of look around, but he did a follow-up and said he's gotten over, I think it was something crazy like thousands of page views on that in just a mere week. I guess, what are your thoughts on kind of like, I don't think it's as common, but I guess the comparison of saying getting more content out there regularly versus writing quality content and just posting every once in a while.
I'm definitely of the school of thought that you should only hit publish when you're confident that you've created something that is your best work or close to it. Creating loads of content perhaps it still works for some people. I personally haven't seen that. I mean, if you look around at all the major bloggers, which of them are publishing every single day without fail? I mean, some are, but they're multi-author blogs and they already have a platform. It is possible, but there's so much content on the web. So to compete on volume is, in my opinion, not the best strategy. You want to compete on quality, because if you try and compete on volume, you just get lost in the noise. There's so much stuff out there. If you produce just one post that's truly kind of beyond 99% of the other content out there, and it really kind of captures people's imagination, you immediately, just in one post, lift yourself above all the other noise. And if you can market it effectively by basically getting in touch with everyone you can who's relevant, saying, hey, you might be interested in this post, and that post is genuinely good, then you can build an audience extraordinarily quickly. So I'm definitely a fan of producing only the best content, and this is coming from personal experience. I mean, when I started Leaving Work Behind, I was publishing 3 times a week, and I did that for, I think, over a year, and then I cut down to 2, and then a few weeks ago, I cut down to, I'm going to blog whenever I want, probably about once a week, sometimes potentially less, but the point is that I'm only going to blog when I feel like I have something genuinely valuable to say. And to me, that is what any blogger who's looking to build a genuine, engaged audience should do. I'm not saying that quantity doesn't work, but you know, there's enough quantity out there. Just go for quality.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, is there any particular like what's the word I'm looking for? Just like when you write a post, is there like a specific amount of words that you might want to reach for when you're writing your post, or do you not really you kind of just want to get your message out there despite length? It doesn't really matter to you?
I couldn't care less about length. I mean, you could write 100 words that for some reason are utterly inspiring, or you could write a 10,000 word, not that I've ever done a 10,000 word blog post, but you could do an in-depth 10,000 word blog post and totally blow people away with the in-depth and kind of comprehensive nature of it.
Yeah.
Whichever works, as long as it's of a great quality, it doesn't matter. And I don't care what Google may or may not be thinking about word length. I see Google rank stuff that's 100 words all the time. So, quite frankly, that's not relevant to me. I'm just concerned about producing great content, and I assume that the rest will follow.
Yeah. No, I actually, it's funny because, and I have no idea if this is just due part to having pretty much either no or very little competition, but I was able to rank a page on the first page of Google by just embedding a YouTube video in the post and linking to a resource that was related to my target keyword. And there was literally no words on the page at all. It just said, click here to check out this if you're looking for more of this.
Yeah, well, that's Google for you.
So, no, I totally agree with you, kind of, and I hear that a lot, that people can't really trust, what's going to happen or what's going to change. And that's kind of one of my projects. You mentioned a niche site, and that's something that I've been working on for a while, and I've sort of changed things up, and I got my keyword to like page 3, but page 3 isn't going to get me all the traffic. Page 1 will, but I don't know if it's going to happen, so it's it's definitely a tough thing to get into. I figured it was something new for me, so that was something I decided to go after, at least give it a shot,
People who try and build sites solely based upon search engine traffic, 99 times out of 100 are opening themselves up for a world of disappointment, because even if they reach the first page, they may find that they're not on the first page the week after, or a month after, or a year after.
Yeah.
It's possible. I mean, if you look at Pat Flynn, he did security guard training, headquarters.com, with his niche site Jewel, and it's still up there and it's still doing well. So it's possible, but those are the exceptions to the rule. So to rely on Google solely it's to open yourself up to a world of trouble, and I personally wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally, it's something I've totally looked at too, as kind of is this something I really want to pursue? And that was sort of, when I started out myself, I was sort of looking around at, is this an avenue I want to pursue? Because some people, you could spend all of your time, trying to rank content on Google and solely work on that alone.
You'd be much better off taking that time and spending it building genuine relationships with people, other bloggers in your niche, creating great content, and then you'll find that just naturally people will start linking to it. And just to say something else about Google, I optimized lots and lots of posts on my blog for certain keywords. Relatively low traffic, things that I thought were low competition, and none of them got particularly good rankings. You know, there were some that might have been on the first page but quite low down, lots in the 20s and 30s, and I wasn't getting anything. And then one particular post, which was trying to rank for a keyword like entry-level writing jobs, which got maybe a couple of thousand searches, if that, a month, suddenly started ranking for some ridiculously major keyword like freelance writing online.
Right.
And it wasn't the word I was targeting. When I looked at the article, that keyword was barely mentioned, and it still wasn't ranking for entry-level writing jobs. But I'd somehow managed to rank for this keyword that gets like 15,000 searches a month, and it's still there, and it's sending me like 7,000 visitors a month. There's just no, and I wrote a post about it saying, "Come on, guys, what the hell's happened here? I've not even targeted this post for this keyword, and it's ranked, and I put it out there, and I got feedback from Rand Fishkin of SEO Moz, and or Moz, what it's now called, and various other kind of search engine experts. And to be quite honest, the answers they gave were just didn't really make sense, and they weren't. Basically no one could figure it out. No one could say conclusively, this is why this is ranking for this keyword, and all of your other stuff that's targeting lower competition keywords specifically aren't ranking. No one could answer the question, and that's because ultimately, no matter what these SEO experts might tell you, at the end of the day, they don't have a clue what's going on as much as the next person. Well, not necessarily as much as the next person, but no one can really carefully analyze and assess the vagaries of Google, because it changes from day to day, and so much of how it behaves is so unpredictable and so odd that to try and explain it is next to impossible. And really, my post is as good an example of that as any.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I wonder if I'm just kind of thinking about it, and I wonder if there's any possibility that there could be like leading anchor text to that keyword linking like somewhere else to your post. I don't know if you would have seen that or not necessarily. You know, you might get like a ping back in WordPress depending, but that could be potentially some way that it could rank, but I don't know otherwise.
There's nothing unusual in the backlinks portfolio. There's nothing at all, according to the people who have looked, such as myself and Rand Fishkin and so on, that really distinguishes it in any particular way.
I mean, I would assume it's a lengthy article. I know that I did have a fellow one who talked about niche sites, and what he does is he actually targets multiple long tail, lower search volume keywords, and that's how he sort of gets his content to, rank on Google, because he just targets a bunch of lower term stuff through lengthy articles. But I would think in this case, if you had it set up, your metadata has got that keyword, the title has the keyword, the actual URL has the keyword, your on-page SEO, like your headings and everything that, you've done italics or bolding, and, if you haven't done any backlinking, then it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but that is really interesting.
The keyword wasn't mentioned in any of those areas. The keyword was barely mentioned on the page.
Yeah, that is crazy.
And as for ranking for low competition keywords, I did an experiment where I launched a blog and wrote high quality articles of between 700 and 1,000 words, and I specifically targeted extreme long tail keywords. So we're talking like 5, 6, 7, 8 words, and they would attract maybe 20 searches a month, and the competition was non-existent. We're talking like really loosely relevant forum posts, Yahoo Answers, that kind of stuff with zero backlinks.
Yeah.
And I wrote, well, in the end, I wrote about 60 or 70 of these posts. Not a single one ranked on the first page for any of the long tail keywords. And it kind of proved to me that Google is not necessarily after quality. Google can't adjudge quality, as much as people say that now it's kind of reading the page. That's rubbish. They can't adjudge quality. At the end of the day, it's still relatively archaic. It's still how old's the domain, how popular is the domain, how many backlinks are pointing at the page. And you can have a really shitty piece of content that has the right things going for it, and it will rank. And you can have a great piece of content that has few backlinks and no domain authority, and it won't be in the top 100. And that's just the, I'm not judging it really. That's just the way it is,
Yeah.
and I don't want to play that game.
Yeah, no, totally understandable. I mean, it sounds like obviously the strategies you've been using, the fact that you've, obviously you're making an income by, simply writing for these, writing for these companies. I mean, that alone is already kind of giving you an avenue to go on. And then, you like you mentioned earlier, I figured this would be something to bring up and talk about a little bit more. But you talked about, you'd spend your time building relationships with other bloggers. Are there any particular strategies you might use to start reaching out to people? Like, let's say someone starts a brand new blog. Something I've actually heard, I guess I'll just mention before you answer, is that some of these people will say, find 100 or 200 people and just email them and ask them, give them something of value and strike up a conversation. Don't spam them. Let them know that you can help them in some way.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I would say, first of all, concentrate on the smaller bloggers rather than the bigger ones. You can work your way up to the bigger ones, but don't try and kind of jump ahead of the game. So focus on people who are at or above your level first and work your way up. Send unique emails. Don't email people that you don't think you get along with. Don't email people that their blog doesn't really align with your viewpoint. Only talk to people who you genuinely think you'll have a connection with. Only email people if you actually have something genuinely interesting to say. Those are really the key points. Keep it natural. Don't try and start a conversation with someone who you would never try and talk to in real life. Just keep it really natural. And whilst obviously volume is great and contact as many people is great, what's more important is that each connection you make is genuine. That's more important than the number of people you try to contact.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know I had. It's funny because even yesterday I picked up a very small product. It was like $10, and the guy who actually owns the product, he emailed me personally to thank me because he was interviewed on another show, and I liked what they had to say, and I commented on the blog, and he saw that I commented, and then he reached out to me personally, and like that to me, the fact that he's doing that, it's like I've already now started to build a relationship with him. We've emailed back and forth now a few times, and it's like cool to me that now I can, like, this guy's already above a lot of other people that I might not even know of that could be reading my blog.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of stuff I think is pretty cool. Like when you reach out to these people, I know I even used a strategy at one point where I was emailing people a pretty general message where I would offer something in exchange. I'd say, if you could leave me a comment, then I'd gladly do one, leave you a comment on your blog. And I did that for a little while when I was promoting a particular product, and I was able to get over 100 comments on like one blog post.
Personally, I wouldn't recommend that whole if I do this for you, will you do this for me kind of move. It can work, and obviously you've demonstrated that it works, but it's not natural, and it demonstrates that you are just reaching out to them to try and get something from them, even if you are doing something for them in return. So, to be honest, when I reach out to people, the first 2 or 3 emails, I actually genuinely don't want something from them. I'll start with, let's find out if I resonate well with this person, if I can get along well with them. And if that goes well, then maybe down the line I can ask them for a favor. But it always starts with, will I get along well with this person, and can I help them? If there's any way in which I can help really anyone online, I'll do my best to do it, because I believe in kind of goodwill. I don't believe in karma, but I believe that being good to people is a good thing to do. So I'll try and help wherever I can, and I always hope that I can, because I feel uncomfortable unless I know someone very well with asking them for a favor, unless I've done something for them. But it needs to be natural. It's not like, well, I introduce myself, maybe I do something for you, then a week later you'll do something for me if I ask nicely.
Right.
I don't want it to be formulaic. I want it to be, let's start chatting, let's see if we get along. Is there anything I can do for you at all? If there is, I'm going to do it. And then in the future, if there is a favor I need, I may ask you.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally the way to go. And that's something I'm actually working on. I'm trying to build like a list of bloggers that I'd like to reach out to that are sort of similar in my where I'm at with my new blog, because I just rebranded the show. I'd done like 10 episodes, and I was using my own name as my domain name,
Mm.
and I just figured it would make more sense to have an actual show name and something that was easier, and that's where I came up with the Voices of Marketing. But yeah, I mean, that definitely it makes so much more sense, and I think people are going to resonate more if you're just real with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what we're doing right now. You got in contact with me because I followed you on Twitter. You got in contact with me because you found out about me.
Yep.
You asked me for an interview. I say yes. We're chatting now. We chat for however long it is. We get to know each other. And then there's that relationship. And then in, say, 2 weeks' time, because I've done this interview, I might say, hey, would you mind kind of helping promote this for me? And similarly, you might email me down the line, after the podcast and say, hey, can you share this out and make sure your subscribers see it? And I'll say, yeah, of course, no problem. And it's that easy.
Yeah.
I don't know how kind of how old your your podcast is, how long you've been doing it, but the point is that regardless of where you were, you managed to reach out to me, and you will be able to leverage my audience. It won't be the same for every blogger because some bloggers are, they're assholes. But it's that easy. It's about genuine relationships and not being kind of hide what you're trying to achieve. And just being genuine with it, and then if you get along with someone, then that's all it is. Then you start to become online friends, and then you want to help each other. It's no longer, oh, I'm gonna ask this favor, but I feel uncomfortable about it, but I'm gonna do it. It becomes, oh well, that guy's a friend of mine. I know he'll be happy to help me out, so I'll ask him for a favor.
Yeah, I mean that's what's so cool. Just doing the interviews in general. I kind of the whole reason I really started it was I was so hooked up on kind of this whole like shiny object thing that's out there in the whole online marketing world of being so interested in what everybody's doing and all these new products and things coming out. I figured this would be a good way to sort of subside that. And I talked to someone a few weeks back that all they do is SEO. Whereas like you have a totally different view on that. And that's what's cool to me. Like I like seeing what everyone is working on, and everyone's got something that works for them. And a lot of people are having success with different things, but the fact of being able to build a relationship and then go from there, I know, I've reached out to quite a few people, and some of them are pretty big name people that are doing really well for themselves, and now I could email them, and I'm not going to be just some Joe Schmo.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, blogging is massively overcomplicated. In fact, business in general is massively overcomplicated. The two things you need to do is you need to produce something of true quality, and you need to develop relationships. Those are the two things you need to do to succeed. If you get those two things right, then you'll succeed. Forget the SEO, forget social media, forget all of those kind of guest posting, all these different aspects. It does come down to creating awesome content and creating genuine relationships, and the rest follows.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, and that's sort of where I've even had one of the fellows I interviewed. I think he was sort of flattered by it because he's still sort of starting out. He would probably still consider himself fairly new. He's only making a couple $100 a month. But he's still doing well. He's had some success. So I had him on, and he actually emails me all the time, and he listens to all my episodes. So it's like that to me, just having that one guy tell me that, it's like motivated me to want to keep going with it because I know that there's going to be more people out there, and I'm going to be able to build more relationships that are just like that.
Yep.
But I don't know, how are you doing for time? I don't know if you wanted to kind of dig into the other topic that I don't know if it'll take up too much of our time to talk about Twitter a little bit, but
I've got about another 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to briefly go over, I know for anyone who's listening, I actually found Tom because he uses a program called TweetAdder that automates a lot of work that's being done with Twitter in regards to following people and finding other bloggers. So what happened for me is I happen to have all my Twitter emails filter into a folder in my inbox, and I'm actually not a big Twitter user, but I saw an email come up, and I'll see people following me, but a lot of times they're kind of just like you can tell it's almost like spam, I guess, in my case. And I had Tom follow me probably now, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and just by reading the title, the description of what he does, that he's a blogger, and that he's got his blog title leavingworkbehind.com, and I'm like, well, intrigued by just seeing that alone. He's got a face of his photo, so it's very kind of captivating for me. I see this email come up that he's following me, and I'm like, well, who's this? I look at his blog, and very nice blog, and we ended up, I ended up just reading his content and liking what he has, and that's why we're doing this interview today. So I guess, I figured I could leave it up to you. I've used TweetAdder, but if you've probably got a lot more experience with it than I have in time that I think you've used it. If you want to talk a little bit about how that's kind of helped you in the whole Twitter world and maybe building relationships.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've kind of just given the best possible example that you could, because a lot of people will say, no one's doubting the fact that TweetAdder can get you more followers, and any other. It's not just TweetAdder. There are many ways of. It's just a simple. Well, you don't even need a piece of software. You can just simply follow people on Twitter, follow, and some will follow you back.
Yep.
And there's no doubting that you can. If you follow 100 people, you might get 10 following you back, or 20, and no one's doubting that. But a lot of people will say, well, those followers aren't of a high quality. They're not actually engaged with you. And while that's certainly true for a proportion of them, there is absolutely, in my experience, the proportion of them who are truly engaged. There's people like yourself. The reason we're doing this interview is because they use TweetAdder. Otherwise, this kind of situation right now wouldn't even exist.
Right.
There are people who constantly say, like, email me and say, oh, hey, I first found you on Twitter. Your content's great. I've just signed up to the email list. And there you go. You can see, you have clear evidence that it's a valuable thing to do. I suppose the only reservation I have about following this kind of tactic is that you end up having a lot of people you're following, and some people can consider that spammy. And I can kind of see where they're coming from. If you've got, for instance, I've got, I think, 18,000 followers, and I'm probably following 14,000. It's not totally genuine in a sense of the traditional use of Twitter, in that you might follow a couple of hundred people and kind of keep up to date with their feed. So I do understand that, and to be honest, I've been thinking about a lot about that recently, and been considering stopping using TweetAdder and actually going down to 0 followings. But that aside, for any beginner blogger, for any intermediate blogger, if they want to build up a following on Twitter, using something such as TweetAdder is extremely beneficial, extremely effective as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, obviously we talked about it a little bit before we started the interview, but I know that recently TweetAdder changed their version as of, I want to say it was like 3-4 months ago, and the following rules, the auto-following rules, are no longer in place due to some rules that Twitter changed in their kind of license agreement, I guess is what you'd call it, or terms of use. But it's still a very useful program. You can see, I noticed I was going through all the people that actually had not followed me back, but they were people that were like big name bloggers that I just happen to want to follow, and they hadn't followed me back. But I can like whitelist them and make sure I'm not going to ever like remove them accidentally, and I could still follow those people and get rid of all the people that are not following me. And then on a regular basis, I know you said you'd spend, I think, like a few minutes a day, or a few minutes, was it a week? And just go through and start following new people based on certain keywords.
Yeah, it's really not that big a deal. The whole kind of the sky is falling reaction to the update of TweetAdder was blown way out of proportion. I mean, before you could auto-follow, so literally you set it up and off it went, and you didn't have to worry about doing anything. And that was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, that was much better than what it is now. But to follow now is, it's 5 minutes a day. It's not that big a deal. If you've got 5 minutes to spare a day, you can get the same end result as you got with the auto-following TweetAdder version before it. So I really wouldn't worry about it at all. If you're still keen to build a Twitter following, you can do it almost as easily with TweetAdder now as you could before.
Right. No, I know you wrote. I'll link to it in the show notes, but I know you wrote I think it was basically a review on the new version.
Yeah, pretty much. Where it's kind of like a case study of how I use it / review.
Yeah. So I've really, like I mentioned before we started, I promoted the product for some time. I think I was able to get a sale or two out of it, but it's a great program. So anyone who might happen to be looking for that, I mean, there's definitely still people using it, and that's how I found Tom, like I said. So definitely a great program to check out. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes if anyone wants to check that one out. But yeah, I think we've you've shared a ton today, Tom. I figure we could probably wrap this up, and I'll leave a link to your blog, and I'll leave a link as well to, I know you wrote a pretty good I know you have several of them, but if you want to send me some of the articles you have about freelance writing in general, you
Yeah,
could.
sure.
I'll link all those, and anyone could check those out. I know a lot of your posts kind of talk about the different places you could go, like the Pro Blogger job boards and any of the other places, like the Freelance Switch website you mentioned, things like that.
Hmm.
Cool. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.